Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to another Anatomy of Movie. And in the words of Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, Spider-Man has come home to the Marvel Universe. Stay tuned.
Welcome to Popcorn Talk, featuring movie discussion, news, and interviews. Popcorn Talk. We talk movies. And now, here's Popcorn Talk's Anatomy of a Movie.
That's right, ladies and gentlemen. We're doing Spider-Man Homecoming, and he has come back to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Or, not back, he was never there, perhaps. But at least he's back in the Marvel family, although still part of the Sony family. Nonetheless, we're going to talk about it. We have, speaking of Homecoming, we're back as well.
It is a homecoming.
We've been off for a couple weeks, the summer. What can we say? You know, we didn't expect the vacations and the time offs that we took, but we did. And I know a lot of you guys have been asking for us to do this movie, so even though we're doing it late, hopefully we do it justice for you guys. Without further ado, we have the Marisa Serafini.
Hello, everyone. Yes, I'm back.
And the one and only, the Greek stallion, Demetri Panos.
Hey, movie fans, I am so excited to be back. Never take 2 weeks off at the same time again. I get withdrawal when I don't get to talk about movies.
It was quite unexpected.
That was unexpected.
No, I listen. I totally get it. I'm glad this is a homecoming. I really do miss doing the show. I really do, and getting to talk movies. So I'm excited.
Absolutely. And as always, for those of you just joining us, welcome. We truly appreciate it. If you're returning, well, thank you as well. For those of you who are returning, you know that we are very spoiler-filled, so we assume that you've seen the movie, and especially at this point, now that we're a couple weeks behind the release date of Spider-Man Homecoming, you really should have seen this movie. It's a fun movie. So understand that it's spoiler-filled. Second, as we talk about it, we're going to talk about various things, plot lines, production, and so forth. So the various notes that we have as we dissect this, you can also follow along with by downloading the rundown in the description box. There's a link there. You click it, and you get the rundown. So there you have it. But without further ado, let's dive in and start with quick thoughts, starting with you, Marisa.
I really enjoyed this film, and I like the previous Spider-Mans and those iterations too. Those were fun, growing up and seeing at different times in my life. I really enjoyed this, and I thought it was fresh. It felt young, like the teenage kind of young, but not in a bad way. Just like that feel good that we all kind of know and love in like John Hughes movies and stuff. But I'm personally a big fan of Tom Holland, so I was already excited. When that whole casting came about and we all knew it was down to 5 actors and it finally was Tom, and I was like, yes, all right, I'm already gonna see this, because I love him. He was great in The Impossible and everything following since. So I think he's a very strong actor, and he has a lot of charm and charisma. This is a teenager that we're supposed to like, and I did. And it was fun. There was humor throughout, and that you can appreciate, but also adult humor that you can appreciate. It was just a nice balance of a lot of things. And it was light, and I enjoy that for a comic book movie.
All right.
I enjoyed this film.
Demetri?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't think it was awful. I didn't love it, like a lot of people did. And I guess when we talk reception, I can get into this more. But I didn't love it. Many people say this is the best MCU movie. But again, I wanted to talk overpraise when we talk about reception. Aspects that I loved about the movie, that I thought were really good, I should say, are, you're right, Phil, you opened up the show. It's the first time that we're seeing a Marvel movie, not be released by Disney, Sony. So this deal was made to fold Spider-Man in to the Marvel Cinematic Universe. 17 years in the making, so to speak. And yes, he was introduced in Civil War. But it's a big deal. From a business standpoint, from a studio distribution standpoint, that's a big deal. And now for Marvel, who knows what this will do for properties like Deadpool and X-Men, were released by Fox. So it opens up the door. At least it opens up the door for discussion. So we could have multiple studio distribution outlets that we can start seeing other Marvel Universe characters from Disney show up in a Fox movie, vice versa. I think that's fun. That's a big deal, too. Another good thing that I liked about the movie is that this wasn't yet another rehash of boy getting bit by radioactive spider. We know the story. And this jumps in about, I don't know, 6 months or so after he's already been bitten. He already has his powers. There's no rehashing of that. I enjoyed that a lot too. I also like that he's only squaring off against one villain. I think sometimes in these superhero movies, they feel either they're insecure about their superhero and they have him facing off against multiple villains, which it gets bogged down. The last Amazing Spider-Man movie is a good example of that, and this one didn't. This one didn't have that, and it was a good villain too, as portrayed by Uncle Keaton. Thing that I didn't like about this movie was, even though it's a Spider-Man standalone movie, it really isn't a standalone movie, and I felt that, you know, he relied a little bit too much on his friends Tony Stark and Iron Man to get through this movie, where I wished it was just Spider-Man. I don't mind if they bookend it with Tony Stark, but my biggest thing was it was missing the heart of Spider-Man, which is part of the Stan Lee coda, so to speak, of with great power comes great responsibility. This one was with a great suit comes great responsibility. And it really wasn't so much about his power, it was about earning the right to have this techno suit, which I felt they relied on a little bit too much. There was too much tech in it. And that sort of took away from the heart of Peter Parker and the character Spider-Man. And again, too, for those who have cable or what, the Spider-Man movies, the Sam Raimi ones, have been on cable a ton, particularly Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2. Those two movies are really solid storytelling movies about this superhero, and it's never about what gadgetry he has. And again, maybe in the comic books, because I haven't read Spider-Man in a long time, maybe he is all teched out, but I like more of a superhero that has to deal with his powers and the best moral way to use those powers. And for a kid, that's a lot to comprehend, and that's one of the, I think that's one of the big part of the meat of a Spider-Man story. So I thought Tom Holland was good. The cast was, you know, fair. I wish there was more interaction. Again, less Tony Stark. I would have rather had more Aunt May. Aunt May, I think, should have been his moral compass, more so than Tony Stark. Nothing against Robert Downey Jr. and that character, but Marisa Tomei, I don't care that they went Marisa Tomei and younger. She's great.
I love her.
Right. I mean, it's hard not to. I just wish there was more of her, more or less guiding Tom Holland. Like if she had said, with great power comes responsibility, she has the best reaction in finding and learning when she learns that her nephew is Spider-Man. Awesome, hysterical. But I wish there was more of her. So yeah, it was a little bit of a mixed bag. I didn't hate it, but I didn't love it. I don't think it's the best in the MC universe, but I did have fun. And it looked great in 3D, too, when I saw it. So throw that in there.
We have Anthony in the booth. Anthony is our engineer for today, and he also saw the movie. He was dying to get in on this. So, Anthony, I'll let you have a chance to speak. What did you think?
Yeah, it was pretty great. I liked it. I like it a lot. I think it's like, I don't think I have top 3 like Spider-Man movies, but it's definitely my top 2, and then it'd be like Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man Homecoming. I liked how he started off without. No, he kind of starts with the suit, but by the end of it, he doesn't have the suit, and it's kind of like what Robert Downey Jr. Iron Man tells him, like if you're. That one line he has with, you know...
If you're nothing without the suit, then you don't deserve the suit.
Exactly. And at the end, you know, he doesn't have the suit, and he still is able to save the day and be the hero without the suit, without all that tech. And I was a little put off with the tech, too. Like, I wasn't sure how I felt about it. I still have, like, mixed feelings about it. Like, it was cool, but also, why does he need all this tech? Like, he's Spider-Man, you know? Overall, I really enjoyed the film. It was fun. I really liked the colors of it, the brightness of it, the fun of it, how lighthearted it was. I liked his friend, the man in the chair and everything. Some people I saw online was a little mixed about that character. I personally enjoyed that character. I think his name was Ned, right?
Yeah, Ned.
This is an origin story for the man in the chair.
Right? Yeah, I've heard that too. Yeah, I thought it was pretty great. And Zendaya was also really great with her like comedic beats and stuff. I think she nailed it spot on. But yeah, overall it was a really good movie, really fun. Yeah, I agree with Demetri. I don't think it's like the best one. Then again, it's all like opinions. I think it's up there for sure with like some of the best MCU movies. Overall, it's definitely a must-see.
You know, I think for my money, and I'm not the first one to say this, but he really is your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man, in a full sense. You know, by the end he could join the Avengers, but he chooses not to. And so that's what this movie really is. It's a little bit more low key and less so that he's fighting just one villain. I just like the fact that the stakes, they're great, but it's not like the world's gonna explode if we don't pull this wire or something of that nature. Like it's still low key, but in his world, there's a lot at stake there. You know, and it hits home. The fact that, to be honest, one of the things I didn't like about the movie, I felt the action wasn't on par with a lot of things, and maybe that's just I'm having action scene fatigue. But you know, I don't know. It didn't necessarily bring that many original aspects to it. I felt, but what I did appreciate, the car ride between Vulture and Spider-Man was one of the more intense things ever, and had no action apart from him taking out a gun.
I gotta say that was like probably my favorite scene.
Yeah, and
that was just based on acting too, because it just shows like both of those guys are like really strong actors before, you know, even just comic book aspect of it.
That scene for me was a mixed bag. I liked the entering the home. It's like, oh, okay, all right, I like this. The first part of the car ride, it was like Zendaya's character there, Michelle, or I mean, just had like verbal diarrhea. Like she was.
That wasn't Zendaya.
That's right. I'm sorry, my mistake. You're right. It, like his girlfriend that he asked. Right.
Yeah, the prom. I'm gonna call her a prom date.
The
even though it's not
homecoming.
prom.
Right. Yeah, it was homecoming, right?
It's homecoming.
Yeah.
It's literally called homecoming.
That diet, like she was just like going on and on for like no reason. Like there was no reason for her to be explaining everything like that, and she was explaining everything.
Well, that's a girl that's a 16-year-old girl.
Okay, it was just like, now when they get to the school, and then the gun comes out, like I get that. And then in the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movies, when the villain finds out that Peter Parker is like, oh, they put two and two together, like. Sometimes Peter Parker doesn't put two and two together to figure out the villain, but it ends up like it was a tense Thanksgiving Day dinner with Willem Dafoe as Hobgoblin. But when Michael Keaton takes out the gun and says, look, you just saved my daughter's life, and for that I'm grateful, but that's it. And like when there's the realization as to who is who, that scene in the car when they were parked in front of the school was really good. And to your point, it was because of performance. Michael Keaton was great. And Tom Holland was like, oh crap, what do I do?
Right.
Like,
also, that particular scene, if we're going to talk about it, that particular scene, the production aspect, the lighting, it was actually set for a moody, kind of thriller mystery
almost
aspect.
noir.
Yeah, it was like actually set up as a thriller scene, you know. So I think just the execution of that scene alone, you isolate that from the movie, it's really good.
It might be the second best car ride scene ever, besides I Could Have Been a Contender by Marlon Brando.
I don't know if I
maybe
get that far. Liz is the character's name.
Liz.
Or driving Miss Daisy. Just saying.
I hated that movie.
But, you know, I want to go back to the suit for one quick second, too, since we were talking about it, is that the one thing I appreciated about this suit was its texture. I think, like, in the previous Spider-Man movies, like, this one had almost like a microfiber kind of a cloth. It seemed like something real that I could, like, you could touch and go, oh, that's, like, sort of cool. Like, where the past Spider-Mans, it seemed like a latexy.
Yeah, this one seemed more meshy.
Yes.
And the other one seems more spandex.
Yes.
But, like, we do have a section on suits we could talk about later.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let's sort of dive, you know, I don't want to gloss over how Spider-Man came into the Marvel Cinematic Universe, because I think it is quite a journey. And, you know, we had made mention that Kevin Feige kind of wanted this to happen, and so the quote goes, "It really came down to me telling Amy in her office that I think the best thing for this character is Sony has the rights. That's not changing. Have Sony pay for the movie, distribute the movie, market the movie. Just let us make the movie and incorporate him into our universe." And Amy Pascal gave the thumbs up. I'm sure there was a lot more discussion besides just that.
Yeah.
But certainly a start. And I am amazed that they were able to make this work.
We actually have a clip of the master of the MCU to talk about the homecoming, so to speak, that we can watch. But it's a big deal from a business standpoint too. Like this
I'm
is,
sure.
you know, so
Kevin
So
Feige.
here we go.
yeah, Kevin Feige talking.
Kevin,
about,
what you got for us?
What do you have?
It feels great. It feels like a dream. It feels like so much of what we've done at Marvel Studios just started with very few people in a room going, boy, it'd be really cool if we could do this. It'd really be cool if we could do that. But it probably could never happen. This, by far, is the pinnacle of that. And sitting down with Amy Pascal for the first time and going, what if we brought him home? What if we brought him into the Marvel Cinematic Universe? And every step of the way, from finding John Watts, certainly Tom Holland, who is a miracle delivered to us as the unbelievably great Peter Parker, Robert Downey joining the cast, Jon Favreau coming back. It felt incredible. And for me personally, having been at Marvel for 17 years, it started my first day. David Koepp script came in for the first Sam Raimi Spider-Man. I met Sam Raimi for the first time, and I met Amy, and I met Laura Ziskin for the first time. And now 17 years later, bringing him into the cinematic universe that didn't exist when we did that first movie is amazing. And it's a testament to the character of Spider-Man that there's so much left to be done with him. And I think that's another thing we wanted to prove. We really wanted to show people, you haven't seen what Spider-Man can be. Because he was never created to be a hero by himself in a city. He was created to be an unbelievably different type of hero, younger, have other responsibilities, in contrast to the Iron Man and the Thor and the Captain Americas out there. And now we get to do it.
So there you go.
And that's cool. And considering he's been involved since the Sam Raimi, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man, when there was no universe like this, you know, they just would say, well, this movie did great, we're going to make a sequel. You know, it wasn't like thought of like the F-word franchise, so to speak. 17 years to get him in here. And like I said, it's a big deal.
I think Universe is the new franchise. Like
Universe,
everyone
yeah.
wants a franchise, but
Now
Universe
when
is what you aspire towards.
Yeah, true. And not since like something like the Towering Inferno, where that was like a Fox movie and a Paramount movie, and that was like a whole rights thing. This too is that kind of a big deal because Marvel Cinematic Universe, who wants to get the money, and Disney, since they bought Marvel, has been releasing these movies. And like I said at the top during my review, it opens the doors now and says, Kevin Feige and even Disney to an extent, because usually they will clamp down on their property. It's like, oh, we're not going to have somebody else release it. Like that's, you know, Marvel's us. But the mere fact that they're open to it and then Kevin Feige is able to put it all together, like I said, it opens up the doors to and we get less crappier movies. Once they're, and I mean that, like if the Fantastic Four would ever be rolled into this universe, we're not going to get a crappy Fantastic Four movie. Time, thought, and the work is going to be put into it so that it meshes seamlessly.
As long as
You know what I'm
egos
saying?
don't clash. I mean, to be honest, I would love to see the Sony side of this more. Because it's all a lot of the stuff is from Marvel's perspective and how they were able to put this together. I would love to see kind of, you know, the Sony side of it.
Well, don't forget
I
Amy
know-
Pascal, okay, who worked and then she ran Sony, and then she was very embattled because of the Sony hack. But now she has real estate on the Sony lot. She's a producer. She was part of that. I think having her, in a sense, she's a linchpin, and having worked with Kevin before, I mean, that helps. And she's able to bring her experience of working with Spider-Man for so long. I think from the Sony perspective, they needed something too. Sony's been, I think it was an easy yes for them because they've still been embattled. They've had power change, studio head change, and they haven't had that many, let's say, hits. Although this summer, they're doing great. I mean, they had Baby Driver, they had Spider-Man Homecoming, they're doing really good. So
They need it.
They need it. And for them, you know, and then I think the big piece is Disney. I don't know how how Disney said, okay, we'll let them release it. Because if Disney said that to Paramount might not be in such dire straits because they had Iron Man. You know what I'm saying? So it was a good symbiosis. He's in, now Sony has product. They're going to come up with a Spider-Man animated movie, you know, and he's going to continue to do one-off movies. I believe he plays some semblance of a part in Infinity War.
Yeah.
It's great for Sony and for Disney too, because that means all the Spider-Man fans. It just expands the universe, as you said.
That's right.
It's good stuff.
Absolutely. So let's, unless anyone has anything else to add, let's talk about sort of the writing process and how it sort of came about. You know, when you look at this movie, they always looked at it like, imagine if John Hughes got to direct this movie. What would that be like? And I feel
Epic.
for the most part, the evidence of that is there throughout. But we'll never know how that would have looked with a superhero, unfortunately. But you know, this is the culmination of that. You know, interesting backgrounds. You know, these guys' backgrounds primarily in comedy. When they worked with, you know, they've done Horrible Bosses and things of that nature, and really kind of writing this one together, coming together.
Yeah, it's interesting because we had Marvel hired Jonathan Goldstein and John Francis from, you know, Horrible Bosses, but then because and they also worked with John Watts back then, and so they were at first they were the only writers that had been attached to the project, but however it turned out that there were other people. John Watts and his frequent collaborators, Christopher Ford, also have credits. So again, like you had the two people attached at the beginning, and then John Watts brought in his own guys, and so the first two original people still have credits. But you know how rewriting always goes over and over again. The original stuff usually don't really turn out to the final result.
Right. Yeah, I mean, there was a lot of writers attached. What I find interesting is that Jonathan Goldstein, the pair, they literally had, and it's no joke, they had about 3 days to put a pitch together to talk to Marvel about why they should write the movie. 3 days to put everything together. And that's like, oh, okay. And Jonathan goes off and says, and this is out of the Hollywood Reporter, he thinks it was a combination of the humor with the relatability and the high school story. You know, there was this high school kid who happened to have superpowers. So I think that their take on this, you know, we've all said, is what captured Kevin Feige's like imagination and attention, and saying, yeah, up till this point, like I know that Tobey Maguire in the first Spider-Man movie is actually graduating high school, going into college. The people with Andrew Garfield felt that maybe they were a little bit too old, although I felt he was good. This one's the first time we do see a little more Peter Parker and his high school life. And they do it on a fresh approach, because the whole MJ reveal that comes at the end, you go, oh, that's cool. And MJ plays a big part in Peter Parker's social life, right? So, yeah, I think they did a really good job on connecting that group. And we can talk about the boy in the chair, or the man in the chair character, but that definitely is what, at least Jonathan Goldstein believes, is what got them the gig in 3 days. To put it together to pitch.
Good for them.
Yeah.
Well, also in terms of Watts, he really appreciated the fact that, as you made mention, that they didn't have to go back to the origin story, but even more so the fact that in terms of him wanting to be a superhero, it wasn't a new notion. It wasn't like just wishful thinking. It was like, oh well, there's already superheroes within this universe, I want to be like them. It's the same way, you know, someone would aspire to be a firefighter. It's like now you get to really do aspire to be a superhero because there's tons of them out there. So maybe I get to be one too. And in his case, he does.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what all those things kind of were meshed together and make for this movie. Let's talk about the various storylines. Where would you guys like to jump in? Marisa, you make note that it's a young adult film.
Well, I feel
John Hughes-esque.
John Hughes-esque, and we've talked about John Hughes in length on our other dissection, so longtime fans know how much we all love John Hughes. I definitely got that vibe and that tone from this film. More so because, like, you had that teenager. It feels like kind of a coming of age a little bit, with the help of friends or family, you know, within that society, you know, and he's usually placed in a situation where he has to overcome, and like that's such a John Hughes type of trope as well. I mean, you see it in other films, but John Hughes is known for that. And it was a lot of feel good. I said it at the beginning. It felt like a light movie. Teenagers would love this film.
Mm-hmm.
Young adults, this is definitely geared towards the young adult generation. And I think Tom Holland does a great job of actually fitting the bill of looking like a teenager. Compared to him and Andrew Garfield, he's great. He was a bit older. Even Tobey Maguire, I didn't really believe him as a teenager in high school. But I think Tom Holland definitely has the physicality and believability of a young person going through high school. And
Even though he's 21.
Well, he was 19 when he was first casted, so technically he was a teenager. But I'm saying, like, physicality and believability that he is a person stuck in high school going through all X, Y, and Z and going through the motions and the teen angst, I felt it in this film. And it doesn't really take away from, like, the seriousness. And there were some dark moments in this film. But it felt like a teenager type of problem compared to an adult world type of problem that we see in other films.
Yeah, but see, for me, his teen angst wasn't so much suffering through high school. It was about suffering not being an Avenger. And that, to me, like, I like that they went younger, but had it been John Hughes, he definitely would have explored. It would have been a different movie. And again, I don't mind that they changed the cast and became more diverse. In fact, I respected that and appreciate it. They were a breath of fresh air because this is the third reboot of this franchise within 15 years. And that's sort of kind of a short period of time, right?
Very.
Yeah.
So, Jesus, what are you going to do? And that was my biggest problem. It's like, oh no, kid gets bit by a spider again. And they were smart. I felt that they were very smart in the way that they brought him into this movie. But again, had he not had to rely on Tony Stark and wanting to be an Avenger and just having to deal with his power. I mean, dealing with those kind of superpowers should be enough for teen angst. Shouldn't be whether or not I'm going to get the suit and I get to do this. And like, he has these powers. He even says in one scene, he goes, but how many kids do you know can stop a bus with their bare hands? And that's what he should be dealing with. How do I deal with these powers and yet have, you know, and I know they touched and have a high school life, but he was way more interested in being an Avenger than he was in doing his homework, so to speak. And my other problem too is, you know, he ditched on his friends a lot. You know, particularly the science or the contest, right?
The academic
team.
Yeah.
And I don't think granted, as Spider-Man, he saved the day and he saved their lives. I get that. But I would figure, with the exception of Flash, who seemed to be really pissed, everybody else was very sort of kind of forgiving of him. And I'm like, no, he was the anchor. You could tell he was the smartest kid there, right? There wasn't enough. Like, the girl still says, I'll go out with you. Even though you screwed me over, we still won, but I'll go out with you. There wasn't enough, and like I said, I felt with the adult, John Hughes is always great with adults, especially parents, right? Mm-hmm. And this was a time to let Marisa Tomei shine, because that's what she can do great, you know? She can be very motherly. I wanted to see more of that, so.
You know, I think... When I look at it, I don't necessarily disagree with a lot of what you're saying. However, there are moments with him. The big distinction is, you know, like when Tobey Maguire has to deal with his various problems, like he's trying to figure out on his own again. Whereas I don't necessarily mind the fact that he wants to be an Avenger, and because his outlook, I like the idea that he's just having fun. In fact, he says that to Jon Favreau.
Happy?
Yes, happy. Like, why are you doing that? Because it's fun. And so that idea, in terms of what really grounds him as a teenager, like I imagine, you know, that's kind of, I get like being bullied and things like that in the Tobey Maguire stories in the way that he was. But at the end of the day, there's just that excitement for having these powers rather than struggling to have to figure out how to use them. I like that distinction because I didn't necessarily want to go see another movie about a kid struggling with his superpowers.
Yeah.
Understood.
Can I say?
Sure.
Like, yeah, I completely agree with you, and I think it's very important to make that distinction between the Tobey Maguire films and this film, because I felt like the Tobey Maguire films, he just didn't have that like fun side to him of being Spider-Man. Like from the first film, it was like, with great power comes great responsibility. Like, sure, you see him having fun when he's like first getting the powers and he's learning how to do it and everything, but after that it kind of fell into like this very serious tone with it, while this one, like how you said, why are you doing that? Because it's fun. And I think that's what Spider-Man's all about. He has these quips when he's fighting the burglars in the when they're stealing the ATMs and everything. Like, he has fun. Like, I think this is a perfect like embodiment of what Spider-Man is.
Yeah, but my only counter to that is the quips have been around since Tobey Maguire. Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man did that too. Tobey Maguire had fun web slinging around New York City. He was like going woohoo and all that stuff. He had that when he learned that he could jump across a building. He was really happy about that. And it became, and to your point, it became sort of more serious at the end when he started to realize that having these powers could affect the people that he loved around him. The end of Spider-Man isn't the happiest of endings. He's at the funeral for Willem Dafoe's character, I believe it is, and he realizes that, oh, I'm in love with MJ, but I can't be with MJ because if it's ever found out that she's my girlfriend, they'll take it out on her, and they built that. Now, I know you don't want to rehash that, and we don't know what's going to happen with the MJ in this series. But they had fun, and Andrew Garfield was great at the sarcasm. That's what people said, that he was really good at embodying the sarcasm. So it's been throughout the series. Tom Holland just happened to be good at it, too.
And I feel like this one, the Homecoming, is more tonally lighter, only because the Tobey Maguire version is that, like, yeah, it gets dark because he actually deals with a death. He deals with Uncle Ben's death, and then that's how his powers, he became more serious of a type of Spider-Man, and the reasons behind of saving people and doing X, Y, and Z. Like, he had an actual motivation and kind of a revenge story.
Yeah.
And it dealt with his friends and his family. It was personal to him. And I felt this one in Homecoming, I was going to say Tom Holland. Peter doesn't really deal with the death. He's just dealing with his day-to-day life as a teenager who's also in high school. He has something to aspire to, the Avengers, because that's all he really knows. Those are other heroes that he can relate to and actually try to attainably get part of this group. He doesn't have a death, revenge, dark type of storyline in his motivations.
I would be curious to see how they're gonna go about this, because if you look at with the Avengers, they have now they're dealing with the consequences of their actions, right? That's what Civil War's
all about.
Hinges about. Right. From Tom Holland's perspective, you're right, Marisa. He's never dealt with that, and if you look at Civil War in terms of that fight. I mean, what he walks away with is not the seriousness of that fight. It's like, oh, I got to take Captain America's shield, and how fun that was. And because at the end of the day, like, there's, he didn't really see the casualties of that,
right,
and what that fully means. And so I think in time he's gonna. I'm very curious to see how dark they're gonna get, because Marvel and these movies have never really gone to like the Dark Knight level of seriousness.
Yeah.
Whereas Sam Raimi, I mean, it's not fully to that level, but it's pretty dark.
Yeah, like I said, just rewatching them again, It's interesting, and what about Spider-Man 2, what's very fascinating is that he really wants to be with MJ. He wants to have that life. He wants to have the collegiate life. And he's not in high school. And his powers, it's not like the suit that gave him the powers. Because he wasn't thinking about being Spider-Man, the powers sort of fade away. And it gets to a point where he doesn't have them anymore. And it's like the Superman 2 conundrum of, if I be human so I can have human love and a human life, but I give this away, then I can't save the people that I love. And I'm going to need to, because these are extraordinary villains that I'm going up against. And that's where Superman 2 really works, like, wonderfully from a story standpoint. And this one, again, I don't know where they're going to go. It's going to be very interesting on his next standalone and what ringers they may put him through in Infinity War.
I would have
They've
liked...
set a good stage, though.
And that's the thing, it's not a standalone.
Yeah.
Well, it was never going to be.
Yeah.
But I would have liked to, as great as we've touted that car ride scene, I would have liked to see, in thinking about it, Vulture really explain kind of the effects of Tony Stark. Because, when you talk about consequences, the whole reason why he's in this is, Tony just keeps screwing him over. They had the gig, and then what are they calling themselves? The USDD or something like that.
Oh, right.
Anyway, Tony's
cleaning crew.
Anyway, Tony's company comes in, and they're going to be responsible for the cleanup of New York, which, and so that's why, I like the blue collar type of villain, rather than get screwed over by the system again and again, and especially Tony represents that billionaire lifestyle, and not only is he like a billionaire, but he's a billionaire superhero.
Yeah.
You're kind of like, well, F you, guy. I'm tired of this, and I'm going to take matters into my own hands. And that was the seriousness, and it was explored, but I would have loved to see it hit a little bit more home.
And it was,
so to speak.
And it was played really well by Michael Keaton.
It was.
I mean, this guy's renaissance back into movies for me has been great. I mean, winning an Academy Award, he was great in The Founder. He plays a good villain here because you believe him as the blue collar worker. In Spotlight, he was fantastic. I want somebody, Birdman, somebody needs to put him in a good comedy. I mean, this is where this guy got his chops. He was in comedy. He's a funny guy. But it was good to see that aspect of a villain, and at least it was a villain that didn't become a villain in the Marvel Universe from being zapped by lightning or being bit by a snake or, doing a science experiment gone wrong. In a sense, he's like the anti-Batman. He puts all this stuff together so he can fly, but it's alien tech, but he's still a guy. He doesn't have superpowers outside of his tech.
Yeah, I liked his motivation because it came from that civilian aspect. That's actually relatable. Like you can understand where he's coming from.
Absolutely.
And even John Watts said for the character of Adrian Toomes, he says you usually get to see in Marvel movies, you get to see the story of a playboy billionaire inventor, you get to see the story of a Norse god, you get to see the story of an American icon. Every time you see one of those films, I'd wonder, what is it like for a regular person? What does just a regular human being who lives in New York City know about this event or think about this event, where it's the public opinion? And that was the character of Vulture, because he was the guy who got screwed over by the Marvel people. So yeah, he has the right to be rightfully pissed.
You at least understand where it's coming from, and he seems to be. Look, first and foremost, he wants to put a roof over his family's head. You can tell that he cares for his daughter, but he's in a position by selling this alien tech, albeit it's wrong, but he gives his family the best of what he's able to. He's not braggadocio about being rich. They live a good life.
It was a nice house, though.
It was a nice house, but he wasn't You know
It's
what I
not
mean?
the best house.
Yeah.
Right.
You know,
Yeah.
sort of
At
like
Tony Stark's house.
So, and that's what I really enjoyed about that character as well. I mean, can we all agree that this is probably, too, the first Marvel movie that's sort of reversed engineered? Meaning that our past Marvel movies, we met the superhero first, whether it be Iron Man, Captain America, Thor. We already knew Hulk, right? And then they were put into the bigger Avengers movie, right? In this movie, Spider-Man was, you know, more or less drafted by Tony Stark to be in this fight in Civil War. So we saw him, albeit as a smaller cameo part, and then he gets his own movie. You know, it's sort of like a weird, it's reverse engineering. It's like where he was in a bigger movie, and now we're going to give him a smaller movie, and that, like, Black Panther, the upcoming, is sort of the same, where he now is going to get his own movie as well.
Well, if you watched wrestling at any point in your life, it's not. That's how they do it.
Well, I thought you were going to say reverse engineering is that in this particular film, the first 5 minutes is all about Vulture.
Yeah.
And then it gets to the opening credits, and then you see Peter Parker. And I was like, okay, now they've already established the villain. We know who's going to be the bad guy. And I thought that was a nice, different telling of how of narrative that you usually don't see in comic book films like this.
I have to say I completely agree with what you just said, and like I love that they made Vulture and Keaton's characters so multidimensional. As an audience, we could sympathize for him and his motives, although we know it's the wrong way to go about it.
Right.
And also, I feel like they kind of took like a page from if you guys seen Marvel on Netflix, the Daredevil series, how they gave a lot of screen time to developing the Kingpin's character and built him up, and I feel like they did it right here as well, where they built up this villain, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I would agree with you. I want to put a pause on him for one moment, only because I want to move to Tony Stark because, you know, obviously the two are intertwined. But, you know, in terms of Tony, I want to talk about the decision where he brought him in, but then he realized, okay, maybe he's a little bit too young and I shouldn't have made that mistake. And now, you know, the whole story is really the effects of Tony Stark sidelining Spider-Man. And Spider-Man being like, whoa, I was just in an Avengers fight. Now, why not, you know, bring me in? So I want to get your guys' perspective on that.
Well, you know, I mean, this is where the movie relied too much on Tony and Happy. And Happy, I have my opinion about Happy is he was a dick. Like, I mean, in all honesty, he was a dick because Peter Parker being trying to be the responsible superhero was like, hey, Happy, I found alien tech. What am I supposed to do with this? Like, this is alien tech. And Happy just kept on ignoring him. Like, literally hanging up on him, not listening to him when he's going through. And I'm like going, all he needed was one adult, like, to listen to him. But then it would have become maybe an Avengers movie.
Well, also,
you know?
I think the problem is too, not to intrude, but Happy's been, I mean, love Jon Favreau.
Absolutely.
Big part of Iron Man, of course. You know, directing all of them. But just the character itself of Happy, he's usually not a dick. And that's the problem.
Usually
because,
isn't.
like, the way they establish him, he's a good side character too, and he's helped Tony Stark through all of his films and X, Y, and Z. He's really an okay guy. You know, it's like we never actually seen him be an a-hole.
Right.
And he was such an a-hole to Peter in this. I was like, Happy, I don't really like you, and I shouldn't.
Okay, so I wasn't the only one. How about you?
No.
Did you?
No, I
similarly?
understand and agree. I mean, this, you know, if he didn't have time, assign it to somebody else. Especially because it's not like there's a difference between Spider-Man wanting to be an Avenger and him just sending inquiries over to Tony Stark and being like, hey, you brought him in.
Right.
So that's on you.
Yeah.
And so there was that slight disconnect there.
And it's a big deal. I mean, it was, you know, it was alien tech. This isn't your typical bank robbery kind of thieves that your friendly neighborhood Spider-Man's going to take care of. And I just felt that was sort of kind of nagging at me, going, why are like the adults like that we're supposed to like being jerks when there's no reason to be jerks? Like the second he said alien tech, their radar should have flung up and said, "Oh, wait, oh, we got to pay attention to this." But then it becomes a different movie.
Well, here's the
And
problem.
it's a hole that they wrote themselves into. I don't know how you unwrite that.
It's to me, it's fairly simple. I mean, but the problem is, it's always tough to understand because it is a universe. What the hell's going on in the rest of the universe at any given point? So who knows? Like Happy could have literally been dealing with, I don't know, the destruction of 5,000 planets and Earth was about to be shattered and the alien tech was not. You know, now obviously that wasn't necessarily evident, but I'm just saying that's why you don't know where people's priorities lie in that.
Understood.
In this universe at any given moment.
But here was my other little cohesiveness thing. If you watched Civil War, they're already in that location in upstate New York. I mean, that location is featured in that movie. And it seems fully furnished to me. It seemed pretty done. So now when I'm watching the movie, I'm going, wait a minute, what are they moving? Like, Civil War, it looked like they had, and since this takes place after Civil War, I was like, wait, why did he have to move stuff anyways? Because Tony Stark's Avengers are already living there in a beautifully furnished place, compound. So,
you know, like when you go to a hotel and you realize you forget, like, your wallet, but it's too late?
So you go to
Kind of like that.
Okay,
I
got me.
That's
on
the
that
best
one.
I got.
Interesting.
That's a good one.
Well, can we talk a little bit about Tony Stark? I mean, like,
Yeah.
Robert Downey Jr., I love him. He's a great actor.
Yeah.
And, like, he's a really good Tony Stark. I did have a problem with him in this film because, again, it's not standalone. And I felt like Tony Stark was always the one coming to save the day, not Peter Parker.
Yeah.
It was really frustrating. Like, Tony, we should not be rooting for you. This is not your freaking film. It's called Spider-Man, not Iron Man.
And can I ask you a question regarding that? That's because you bring up something that happened to me when I saw Spider-Man. To me, it seemed more people were applauding Tony Stark Iron Man whenever he showed up, more so than they were applauding Spider-Man. And this was supposed to be a Spider-Man movie.
Yeah, exactly.
And people were like totally like going, yeah, Iron Man. And I'm like, this is Spider-Man.
Yeah, and it was also frustrating because especially like the boat ferry scene when Spider-Man does this awesome task of trying to put it back together and, you know, it fails. But again, Tony Stark is literally the one who comes and swoops up and saves the day, and all the passengers are clapping for him. Like, Spider-Man was the one just trying to save your life. And it was very frustrating because I feel like every big moment, every big scene that could have been, like, Peter Parker could have had the win, Tony Stark was literally right there talking or reminding him about something about the suit, or it just always felt like it went back to Tony Stark at the end of it, even at the end of the film.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't mean to sound this ranty, but I did have a problem with this. At the end of the film, right when like the whole showdown and stuff, it literally cuts to the next scene of Tony Stark's like, hey, I have a press conference for you, I have this new fancy suit for you, X, Y, and Z. It was Tony Stark's idea. It just every beat ended up with Tony Stark. I'm like, this is a Spider-Man movie.
I think so. For me, I wasn't necessarily surprised by that, but I'm just surprised the way they went about it. Right, all the marketing. There was no marketing that didn't have Iron Man as part of it.
That's true.
So it wasn't a shock to me at all.
Right.
I was shocked how little he really was in the movie.
Really?
Which I actually was okay with. However, I didn't like the ways he was in the movie. I think you know, they cited him that they were going for a father figure. He wasn't really a father figure. He was just like, don't do that. Don't do that.
Yeah.
He was an absentee father.
Yeah.
No, I agree. I completely agree.
Yeah. And my thing too is like in a scene before the ferry scene, he was congratulating him for the Washington Monument scene, which I want to talk about a little bit too. But he congratulated him for doing a good job. Hey, all right, big things are coming. And then the next scene, he's like, oh, taking your suit away. Wait, it's like he does good or he doesn't. Like, you just congratulated him, and then the next scene, you're like, the punishment is so hard that you're taking the suit away. And I get it from an arc. I get it's the man that makes the suit, not the suit that makes the man.
But that's what I'm saying.
But
It
right.
always
It
ended
was
with Tony Stark.
Stark.
There was a whole monumental saving scene, and then Tony Stark's reprimands, or like congratulates him.
Sure.
Again, it went to Tony Stark.
Yeah.
The ferry boat, it ended with Tony Stark. Like, and then the whole showdown, it ended with Tony Stark.
Yeah, I mean, that's what I said in my review. I didn't feel it was the standalone movie that the character deserved at this point, especially if you're going to completely reboot. But at its core, like, you still have to have what makes Spider-Man Spider-Man. And he's got to come into his powers regardless of the suit. So, to me, like, what if Tony Stark, he drops him off, okay, kid, see you later, and then at the very end, instead of the Avengers stuff, it was, okay, kid, he goes, you know what, you did really good here. He goes, wait, don't go anywhere. Suit, training wheel protocols off. Like, if they didn't even know there were training wheel protocols, and the arc light reactor lights up, and he's like, what? Because he didn't use any tech in the Civil War fight, right? He was just being Spidey in that cool suit. And then at the end, that gives us our next jumping off point. And then we can see him, like, as the Spider-Man, but he grows into the role. You know, I do wish it was more standalone, too. I agree with 100%.
Well, also, and it was also really heavily tied to the Avengers.
Yeah.
You have to see the other Avenger films before this. You have to see Captain Marvel. Freaking Captain Marvel was
Captain
even
America.
there for...
Captain America.
Captain America, not Marvel, sorry. Sorry, don't read me for that. But we had Captain America come in, even for his cameos, as funny as they were.
They
sure.
were funny, especially
but again,
the very, very,
it was
very,
still
very end.
tied to the Avengers, not standalone whatsoever. And
Well,
I think that really bothered me.
The problem there is too. You get it, they're tying that in, but you're kind of left. It opened up too many questions of like, wait, Spider-Man or not Spider-Man, Captain America. What's the perception currently? Because he's not a good guy, and yet he's.
Well, didn't Hannibal Buress, who I thought was completely wasted, I mean, as the gym teacher, I was like, again, another role where he's like sort of funny, but he's not in it enough because I think he's a really funny guy. But he had a line, I could have swore, where he said something, I think this guy's an outlaw now, but you got to watch this anyways. He's like,
He's like a fugitive or
I think he's
something.
like, yeah.
And it's funny, but
that was all
again,
that was said.
There's not enough. Like again, we're not in a Captain America movie,
Right.
So to bring that in, like I get it, but it just then raises a little bit more questions than needed to be raised
Agreed.
at that certain point.
Agreed. Agreed.
Let's talk about the rest of the kids. There's Liz, there's Ned, there's Flash, and MJ, who is not Mary Jane.
No.
No, just MJ.
She is.
Well, she's not. I think her name's Michelle.
Michelle. Yeah. So, I guess we talk about her.
Yeah.
Zendaya, who plays her, called her awkward and intellectual. She just feels like she doesn't need to talk to people.
Mm-hmm.
It's okay. She was a combination of Allison from Breakfast Club and Lindsay from Freaks and Geeks.
Mm-hmm.
I totally see that now.
Yeah.
I totally see that. I like Zendaya. I think she is a fun, charming person who's also has a big career ahead of her. I mean, she already has a big career. But I think it's good because I remember watching this film, and literally probably the last 10 minutes, I was like, we haven't seen MJ yet. I was like, oh, it's probably her. And sure enough, like 5 seconds later, they revealed there was, oh, my name's MJ. I was like, there it is. We should have seen it.
I thought it was I actually thought that was a very nice reveal. I thought it was like, oh, okay, well played. Like you, I didn't see that coming, and I was, because I didn't know when they were gonna bring in MJ. I wasn't thinking any of that stuff. I'm just trying to watch like the movie. But when it happens, I was like, oh, she's MJ. Oh, good choice. And I like how they went different. And you're right.
I think we're so also conditioned from the previous Spider-Man films and the comics that MJ's a redhead. And I think that also threw us off with just the characteristics of her that we're not expecting.
We always talk about MJ as Mary Jane, not Michelle.
Right.
So, they threw the scent off really, really well. I think she did a good job. I liked the sarcasm that she had. I like that she wanted to go to Washington, not just to be part of this competition, but to protest as well. I thought that was funny. So, and is it Zendaya or Zendaya? Zendaya. Yeah, I thought, I think she was fine in the cast, and she's going to make just a fine MJ. It'll be interesting because since they've changed so much, is MJ going to be a romantic person for this Peter Parker with him?
What does that mean for Liz? Liz took such a shot on him.
Yeah.
She,
well, she's gone. She's where the hell is she? She's in Portland.
Portland. Yeah, it's like she moved.
She moved.
She's out of his life.
Poor girl. She went through a lot and didn't even know it.
Yeah, that's true.
I don't know.
True. And Laura Harrier, who played Liz, I thought was really good too as the potential love interest. I was buying their romance to a point, other than the fact that Peter Parker kept screwing her over. Obviously, he was Spider-Man, and she kept on going back to him. It's like, that's a big competition that you get to go to Washington, be part of this, and your anchor, bugs out on you. Granted, he did save them, but they don't know that. And they weren't really that pissed. It was like, oh, do you want to go to homecoming with me? Okay. And I'm like, that deserved at least a kitty slap to the face.
Right. I didn't really like this relationship
No?
because I don't think it was just well established. I think it just showed that, yeah, he had a crush on her, but he kept screwing her over. Like, how much do you really like her? And so I didn't really see that, and not because of physicality, but the fact that, like, she was towering over him. Granted, she's tall and gorgeous. It's like, and girl has legs for days. I just didn't really see them together. Didn't believe them as, like, I didn't believe their chemistry.
I liked
I don't
them.
think it was, like, well established enough for me to want to root for this relationship.
Yeah, and then obviously she moves to Portland. What are your thoughts on
matter.
Laura Harrier as Liz and the relationship?
I thought she did a good job. I just, to Marissa's point, I didn't understand their chemistry. I understand, from his perspective, she's a gorgeous girl, and like at that point, like again, a different perspective of it. Tobey Maguire, he had a huge infatuation with MJ, whereas this, like, he's just a guy and she's a cute girl. So I don't necessarily fault him there. And she's smart and stuff like that, so it's not just looks alone. But yeah, in terms of him, he's at no point from the perspective of high school has he shown any sort of real qualities. Like what I appreciated, like Flash, as much of a bully as he was a smart bully. It's not like he was this jock that just picked on people just left and right because. No, he's a nerd himself.
Yeah, and he uses words more so than fisticuffs, so to speak. He's a different representation of Flash than what we're used to in both the comic books, from what I understood, from what I remember reading, and from the earlier Spider-Man movies. I mean, Flash was the star of the football team, and he could beat up Peter Parker before Peter Parker got her story. This Tony Revolori, I thought he was a jerk, but it's sort of funny in his sarcasm. But he was like that. He was a jerk. He was a good villain. What were you gonna say, Anthony?
I just love how you said it. Like he uses words, and I was like, I'm really glad. Or I kind of like the line that he drops, like, or not even a line. It's just like the quip of penis Parker. I thought it was pretty great. I was like, it had me laughing.
Yeah, it's a different kind of bullying for sure.
Yeah.
And then when it came to Ned, I think it was just, it's something certainly different where the first person in the Sam Raimi storyline is MJ that really knows the secret, right? In terms of his friends, and so with Ned, obviously it changes the dynamic quite heavily. So I enjoyed that. Yeah, the origin story of Man in Chairs is a good one.
Yeah, see, he was an interesting character for me. Like Jacob Batalon played him really funny. I thought he was a funny character, but there were times where I was like, dude, what the hell are you doing? Like, your best friend you found this out. He says, you can't tell anybody, and the next day he's almost telling everybody. And the whole man in the chair thing for me is I watched the television series The Flash. Mm-hmm. Okay, and there's a kid in that. Cisco.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know exactly what I'm talking about.
I love The Flash. Yeah.
And this kid is basically Cisco. Like, in a sense, he's a wisecracker. He always has like the quip, and Cisco in The Flash. I haven't seen it like the last season, but if I'm correct, he was more or less the man in the chair, you know, for The Flash. And so to me, this character didn't really seem that fresh to me, albeit the funniest thing that happened is when Peter Parker or Spider-Man comes into the room, and he drops in the ceiling, and he was putting the Death Star together. And he dropped the Death Star.
Funny.
That was funny.
I actually liked that because he seemed like that realistic friend that Peter Parker would have in high school. And he had his moments where, again, yeah, he almost spoiled the secret. But at the end of the day, he was still that loyal friend that helps him through, you know, the big battles. And it's not the first time we've seen that sidekick who's always the one who's on the computer figuring everything out behind the scenes. Right. Like, that's a recurring trope, and it helps with this character actually giving him a name, a sense, you know, like the man in the chair, like that's his job. You have the computer geek. Right. There's always the computer geek in every television show or movie or something who's doing all the research, you know. Sure. And that was him. I liked it.
I'm going to be, again, it's a curiosity factor, what they're going to do with him, because if you talk about reality having to hit Peter Parker, it's going to have to hit Ned too, because when you speak of Ned really not understanding it, or just kind of, stating like, hey, here's Spider-Man type of thing, there's going to be consequences to his actions as well, especially if he's going to continue to help Peter Parker.
Sure.
And so I'm sure that's going to be a big dose of reality.
You know, I will say this, and I get it, because he's, what is he, a sophomore in high school in this movie?
Yeah,
or he's a sophomore? Okay, so maybe he's not quite old enough outside of maybe having a paper route, but I don't think there are paper routes anymore. When he gets involved with J. Jonah Jameson, like when he becomes the photographer, because that's always to me, Spider-Man having the job, but maybe that's the next standalone movie when he goes out and gets work as I don't know, working for the Daily Bugle, if I'm correct. Mm-hmm. So, but again, we don't need it here. He's a sophomore in high school. He's still learning his. Yeah, well, that's the other cool thing too, is we do have plenty of years, and the way Tom Holland looks to be aging, like he could do 8 of these movies. And yeah, we'll see him grow into the role a little more, but he's not going to be super old. Mm-hmm. You know, he'll be able to play Spider-Man for a little while, which is a good thing, because that means no reboot for a long time.
One would
well,
hope.
They did, where is it? Donald Glover plays Aaron Davis, who was then supposed to be...
The uncle.
The uncle, but the reincarnation. You want to speak to that, Anthony?
I think he's supposed to be the uncle of Miles Morales, right? Yeah. Who's the current Spider-Man, I think.
Yeah. So Miles Morales takes on the mantle from Peter Parker. Yeah, I don't really read the comics, but that's the story.
Don't go changing who's Spider-Man now into the third movie.
No,
we got to stick with Peter Parker for a little while.
I know. But what I'm saying is they did introduce it.
Right.
As a future thing.
He was actually sort of funny too, and he's like, "You're really not too good at this, are you?" Like with the whole intimidation.
Here we go. Donald Glover, playing Aaron Davis, is a low-level criminal and the uncle of Miles Morales, a.k.a. the second Ultimate Spider-Man. And he dropped the lines like, I don't want, these bad guys in the neighborhood. My nephew lives here. He was talking about the second,
right?
Yeah, Miles, the second Ultimate Spider-Man, which maybe we'll see down the road.
Sure.
Who knows?
Hopefully not too soon.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the big action set piece at the end, the airplane. Just from action set piece. Good action set piece, standard, below par.
It was, Anthony said something that caught my ear. I thought it was fascinating and interesting. You mentioned a lightness and tone in this movie, which I'm like, okay, yeah, totally get that. Anthony said bright colors. That's what that airplane scene to me was. It stood out, and again, in 3D, it looked pretty good, but the whole plane, how the flashing images on the fuselage, because it was supposed to be cloaked, and it's such a fire.
It's like invisible plane.
Yeah. I thought it was pretty good. It looked good in 3D. I'll say that. My only issue is, how would Happy not know that plane
was going down?
Yeah, I'm like, how do you not have a redundancy to the? I mean, you're part of Iron Man, Tony Stark's crew. How did you lose a plane and not? I understand the whole thing with the transponder that they did all that stuff. Oh, okay, but there's usually some sort of a backup. That I know there were no pilots. That I was again playing the Happy's weaknesses. Happy was not the Happy we know in this movie, but the scene itself looked fine. The crash, the end of it where he picks him up, he doesn't kill him because that's Spider-Man. I thought it played fine.
Yeah.
There's some debate about why Peter Parker did what he did, and I want to get you guys' perspective.
Okay, really? Okay. When you say did what he did,
can I just add something?
Yeah.
Can I just add something to that? The scene of the plane. I feel like that was actually the first time where I felt that Peter Parker and just being Spider-Man, he was in actual danger, because he had if he fell, that was it. There was no buildings around. It was actually the first time I felt a sense of danger. I was like, oh man, he can really, really get hurt here. And I kind of appreciated that element to it, where he's on a plane thousands of feet in the air. And I like when you can actually feel if the character's in danger, because he's a hero and he's gonna survive. But getting that sense of danger from him, you're like, oh man, how's he gonna get out of this one?
Yeah, no, I thought the exact same thing, Anthony, because when he was on the monument, there was a line. He was like, "This is the highest I've ever been." Right. And then when he was on the plane, I remember thinking, I was like, well, now he broke his own record.
Right. Yeah.
So. But I liked the plane sequence because I thought the exact same thing, because that was almost immediately after he lost his suit, and that was the first big thing he did without his suit. I was like, oh man, if you fall, you're dead. Dead. I thought that same thing.
Yeah, because he didn't have the flying web squirrel thing. He has the webs by his pits.
Funny.
Yeah, he can glide, the web glider kind of thing. Yeah, he didn't have that, so he was definitely gonna just plummet, because he's still human. He's a super arachnid,
he
man,
is human. I will say one thing about this movie, and the other movies touched on, but they really do. This movie, I think, a little bit more than the previous ones, really showcase his strength. I mean, Spider-Man's a pretty strong dude. I mean, even as a kid, he's got some pretty impressive powers and regenerative healing powers. Albeit, I agree with you folks, had he fallen off that plane, that would have been ouchy. So what's the debate? I didn't, you piqued my curiosity.
I don't, it's not necessarily that, I mean, it's I'm surprised by the debate, but what Spider-Man should have chosen to do, with Vulture. Whether or not he should have done what he did, and I'd say yes, especially for a kid. Yeah.
Ooh, he saved him instead of
just
killing him, right?
Yeah.
As I felt this movie really straddled the line between technology, what makes him Spider-Man with the technology and without. Because I think the Tobey Maguire versions, you actually saw that the web and was embedded into him. It was part of his physical biological system.
Right.
That it was part of him physically. And I felt with this one, we didn't really see that. We only saw the technology was the reasons why he had abilities that he could sling every which way. But the strength, I really like the moments where he actually showcased the physical strength when it came to, you know, lifting all that rubble off of himself.
Right.
It's like, yeah, you do believe that he does also have some physical abilities within himself, albeit from the technological side.
Yeah, and that scene in which you just talked about, that actually is, it was very important, that scene, because it's a bit of an Easter egg scene.
Yeah, isn't it straight off of like a comic book cover?
Yeah, well, I'm not even sure if it's a comic book cover, but it's definitely
actually owed to one of the
a Ditko
Marvel.
A very important comic in which both the director and Kevin Feige said it's really important that we have this scene, because this is they felt that in this movie, this is where he realizes who he is, his strength, and he has that Rocky attitude of, I can't give up because I'm Spider-Man.
Yeah. It's actually when Spider's trapped under all the rubble and he lifts it, it's an homage to the Amazing Spider-Man number 33.
Nice.
Yes.
Also, that scene had like
part of a story.
My favorite shot of the whole movie. It was when he's looking in the reflection of the water, and you see that his mask is underwater, but you see his face, and it's like a split of the mask and his face. And I just feel like I felt like I've seen that so many times, and it's just so beautiful to see it like captured so well on the big screen. And also that scene itself almost like brought me to tears, just hearing him when he was trapped under the rubble and hearing him cry out for help. And it's just like, oh man, like you can hear and feel the disparity in his voice. And like he's isolated. He has no one to rely on but himself.
Right.
Yeah, I really liked the moment because there was great dramatic acting also from Tom. Watching him being trapped under rubble, it literally took me back to The Impossible. Watching him in that movie and all the physical things that he had to go through for that.
I agree.
Yeah, this is why he was casted as Spider-Man.
Yeah.
It makes sense.
Yeah, and you sort of kind of, you needed something like that in this movie as well. But, there's always, I thought you were going to bring up the age-old debate because...
at the ending scene?
Well, no, the webs, like whether they're organic or whether they're a chemical. And I get both sides of the argument, but to me, if you get bit by a spider and you take the powers of a spider, part of that's going to be...
The webs.
The webs. Now, somebody can argue, well, then the web would come out of his butt. Well, okay, it doesn't have to, but to me it always was a more organic kind of thing, and here I am doing this like I'm going to shoot webs. But I get why having Peter design it, because that also means he doesn't have an endless refresh of webs.
Because even the suit
can run out.
Yeah, even the suit reminded you, oh, hey, you're running low on your fluid,
Right.
Yeah. And so I was like, oh, great, there's a limitation to him.
You need some oil. You're running low.
Yeah, for me, it was something that I was previously unexposed to because, in all the other Spider-Mans, that was never an issue. And so certainly something new. So yeah.
It was an issue in the second Tobey Maguire Spider-Man film because remember Peter Parker he wasn't eating properly because he was poor. He couldn't spend money on food, but that also changes with his physical body because he wasn't replenishing himself.
Yeah, well, and that's what I was like talking about. That's a big theme in Spider-Man 2 is him actually unbecoming Spider-Man, and throughout the movie he slowly starts to lose
not eating
his
food
powers.
is different than having to like put in cartridges and
right.
Right.
So what are your thoughts, Mr. Anthony? Or I should call you Uncle Anthony. You're taking care of Brady for me.
I'm sorry, I kind of blanked on that one.
Well, we'll move on.
Yeah.
All right. So, any other story elements before we move on to more of the production elements of things?
Well, we were talking about Tom Holland a little bit.
Love.
Yeah, it's funny because another movie that's been on cable is Heart of the Sea. And I forgot that he was in Heart of the Sea. I said, hey, that's Tom Holland.
And just recently in Lost City of Z.
That's right. And we have, Tom Holland himself to talk about how he got the job as Spider-Man. And I think it's far more interesting having it come from him
directly. All right.
Yeah.
Let's do it.
And
Tom.
I think it's very interesting. I think it's a very funny, interesting story
And that
he
it
got
is.
casted.
That it is.
At the MPAA Awards in London probably 5 years ago, and
He's so British.
one of the interviewers asked me
I
if
love
I could
him.
be a superhero, who would I be? And I say, I'd like to be the Spider-Man after Andrew Garfield. And he says, would you do the reboot of the reboot? And I said, yeah, the reboot of the reboot, maybe in 10 years' time. I would never have guessed that that would first have come true, and secondly, have come true within 5 years. So that was a crazy, crazy day for me.
And I think that's funny that they talk about the reboot of the reboot. And again, we're only talking 15 years. And he's saying, yeah, in 10 years they're going to reboot it again. I'll do it, yeah. I'll do it then.
And Tom Holland, like he says personally, like Spider-Man is his favorite hero, you know, the comic book hero. Like he grew up loving Spider-Man. He's seen like all the movies. Like he loves Spider-Man, and he does have a gymnastic background. So during his audition process, he had to do a self-tape type of audition. But there are moments called inserts,
Right.
where you know you say your name, indents actually. Sorry, you say your name and who you are, and like a little bit about you. And but like in between every certain thing, he would do like some type of gymnastic move, like a backflip or something, just to show his physical ability that he can pull off these actual physical stunts
Right.
that Spider-Man is known for. And he went through an incredible working training, you know, regimen.
Absolutely. As they
for
all
this.
do.
Yeah.
I think it's funny, too, because apparently for auditioning, he sent in several rounds of sending tapes of himself. And he recalls his final test was to meet with Robert Downey Jr., which it almost appears as if Robert Downey Jr. had a final approval as to who we're going to have for this actor. And before he could meet Tony Stark, he said he actually met Robert's stand-in first. So can you imagine Robert Downey Jr. goes, yeah, I'm finishing my coffee. You can go meet the kid and tell me what.
That's like
And it's
meeting
just funny.
Iron Man's suit before you meet Iron Man.
Right. So, you know, so the stand-in comes in and he goes, wow, he looks a lot like Robert. He goes, wow, but you're sort of different in real life. And apparently that broke the ice once they found out. And then Robert Downey Jr. comes in and he said that their chemistry together, he felt the chemistry was great. And Robert Downey obviously did too, you know, because it says, okay, yeah, kid's in. I just think that that's really, I find that a funny story,
Absolutely.
you know.
All right, so let's move on to the production side of things. And mind you, for those of you watching, I also encourage you, you know, we're not the Marvel people necessarily. We're here to talk about movies every single week, and our perspective is much different than if we were full-on Marvel fans. And that is why I say to you, we have a show dedicated just for Marvel movie fans called Marvel Movie News. Imagine that. So for all things truly geek in the Marvel universe and how it ties into the other MCU properties and the various Easter eggs and so forth, definitely check that out. But you know, why have us fully rehash that stuff? We have our own different take on it, and so we hope you appreciate our take. But nonetheless, if you want to go down the rabbit hole, there's plenty more for you to.
Yeah, they definitely covered this movie. Coy was he's a huge fanboy of Spider-Man, and you can check out. He found so many Easter eggs. You can check out that episode. I actually covered it. That's why I know all this.
There you go.
Yeah, and the other thing too is enlighten us, be part of the discussion, and you know, tell us why you may have enjoyed or not. You know, tell us what your Easter eggs that your finds were, because I 9 out of 10, unless I didn't read about it, I might have missed it.
No.
So,
I mean, here's the thing: as this universe grows, it's honestly like a reflection of the real world. We're not going to be able to keep up with everything.
yeah.
And so we're going to need each other as humans within the Marvel Cinematic Universe to keep each other up to date.
Sure.
And have those fun discussions. So let's move on to let's talk about our director John Watts' background in music videos, commercials, and comedy episodes of The Onion and whatnot. But it was really more of his movie that got attention, the Sundance one, which was where do I
Cop
have?
Car.
That's it.
Yeah.
Have you guys seen that movie? I have not.
I have not.
I have not
No.
seen it.
I've actually never even heard that title before.
Kevin Bacon's in it.
Yeah.
Hey.
So that's
Winning.
yeah. Hashtag winning.
That's sizzling bacon.
You know, but we've talked about this in other Marvel movies where really it's very parallel to TV, where the showrunners and the producers really are the driving force behind it. And in when you have universes like this, the directors come in for quote an episode, meaning okay, Spider-Man: Homecoming, do their thing, and then move on. And so they're really not the auteur, not anymore.
And I think I'm glad you brought that up, because this is Disney, this is the Marvel universe, and as we've been learning, particularly with I was going to bring in Star Wars for 2 seconds, but I'm going to stick with Marvel because we've seen how Marvel Kevin Feige oversees everything. Like, we know the controversy behind Ant-Man. Edgar Wright was supposed to direct it, and he got let go. It made big news. And we've also talked about the directors that they're choosing for a lot of these movies. These aren't people who have tentpole movies. Forget franchise and universe. They don't have, like, big movies under their belt to direct. They're hiring these people from comedy television shows and people who've directed one independent movie before. Colin Trevorrow, I know it's going into Jurassic World and such. But here's another example where we're bringing in a guy, we like his sense of style, but you also get the sense that once they start bringing almost too much of themselves into it, somebody says, whoa, I get what you're doing, we don't want that. And so it's almost like they have somebody that's going to listen and contribute to the universe to the best of their capabilities. And I think, John Watts did a good job at doing that, but he also took direction. So you're right. I think the biggest auteur is Kevin Feige and his crew. Yeah. Like, he basically sits down and says, this is what we need. This is the tone. And I really think that he and his team overlook these things with a fine-tooth comb to ensure, as they're filming, that it goes the way he wants it to go, because there's a master plan. So go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I was just, watching this film. I thought I had really no problem with the direction of it all. Mm-hmm. I completely understood it, and it looked so great and then doing the research after and learning after the fact that John Watts didn't really have a big name credit such as Spider-Man, and that he comes from the independent film world, and the fact that this particular movie cost 35 times more than his independent movie that got him the initial job for this. It shows that he's talented, and they saw something in him, and they gave him money and an opportunity, and he ran with it. And watching it, he did a great job. At the end of this film, you wouldn't realize that this guy only has a few films under his belt. You would never think it.
Yeah, and again, I would be surprised if they didn't tap him, if they haven't already, to do the next Spider-Man sequel. So
they have.
And that's what they're doing. He did a good job. We actually have him. We have a video of him too, talking about his excitement about what it was to do Spider-Man.
Here we go.
I had a dirt bike when I was in high school, and I loved riding my dirt bike. That was the main thing in my life that I had to look forward to. And basically, I spent my whole day trying to maximize the amount of time that I would get to ride my dirt bike around. Now imagine if you were Spider-Man. Imagine if you had Spider-Man's abilities and could do all this amazing stuff. You would spend every moment of your day trying to maximize the amount of time you get to be Spider-Man, because it would be the best feeling in the world. And I think that's a sort of a new take that we have on it, which is Spider-Man is, there is all the responsibility that comes with the power of being Spider-Man. But I think it's also important to remember how much fun it would be to be swinging from building to building.
what's important about that take is notice how he didn't say I. He said this is what we felt. And I think that is important when you're in this universe, that it is a we. Your job, if you decide to accept, is to direct. We have faith in you, kid. We're always here for you, kid. Whatever you need, you got tons of resources. But just know it's always collaborative, and the decisions come upstairs. If you want to go off page, we don't mind ideas, but let us know first. You know. So.
Marisa, you have a lot of stuff on in terms of him immersing himself in the world of Spider-Man.
Yeah, of course, he knew about Spider-Man, but he didn't really know to the extent of all the stories and stuff. So he read, like, all the comic books. He read everything that he could get his hands on and really just know the background and the canon of this character. And then he saw he actually went down to Atlanta, I believe, when they were filming Civil War. The scene where Tom Holland, is actually fighting, the Avengers, and he saw that. And that's when he first met Tom Holland, and he really got a part of the franchise even back then. So
that's certainly a great way to be able to dive in,
Oh, yeah,
and it's funny that you say Atlanta, because this is where this movie was mostly filmed, was in Atlanta. Pinewood Studios, which anybody who's a big film fan and wants to know behind the scenes, Pinewood is in England. They've done a ton of stuff from James Bond, I believe Star Wars. But they actually have a studio in Atlanta, which was basically their home base. And as a practical set, though, believe it or not, they actually filmed at a real Atlanta area high school from Midtown High, which is interesting. But a lot of the practical sets, and John Watts, that's the other thing too. And I think coming from independent filmmaking, he tries to stay within his comfort zone. Well, scrappy, so he wanted to do a lot of practical sets that he could, where he could put his camera. And yes, there's a lot of green screen in the movie, but you can tell the practicality of, whether it's Vulture's lair, the schools for which they were in, if it's an actual school that they filmed in. And I think with these tentpole movies, there are a lot of directors who want more of that practicality because it's more tangible, and I think it looks better than CG.
I mean, we'll certainly talk about it with like Dunkirk and other movies, but yeah, it's a reoccurring theme that use the computer graphics to enhance what's pre-existing.
Right.
And the more you can have something existing, the better it will become. So. Yeah,
and the production schedule was not something that Watts was used to, being from the independent filmmaking world and stuff. The actual 80 shooting days, he said, is almost more shooting days than he's ever had in his entire life leading up to that point. Yeah. Just like in total. So he says it was more of a marathon.
Yeah.
He wasn't used to the actual filming of like a full-on big budget movie like this. So
it's a marathon and sprint at the same time.
Absolutely. It's like, so yes, he's a director, but he really got the sense of what it's like to be a big-time director, right, and like have the ability to create something such as huge as that.
Yeah, and again, practicality of sets. The scene in which we talked about Spider-Man being underneath all the rubble and trapped in the rubble, that was in an old phone book warehouse that they used, which again, it's not in a Pinewood studio stage, or maybe at least not 100% in that studio stage, but going to a practical set to give it that feel, that look. I appreciate. It looked, as far as the movie went, it looked good. Yeah. And I think for his first, let's call it a tentpole movie, he did not seem intimidated by the money at all. No. He seemed to handle it well.
And for the most part, he's a pretty young guy.
Yeah.
Very young guy. For a director, especially. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Of this magnitude, yes.
So I think he's definitely got a lot future there. We talked about the real school and stuff like that. Let's talk about the Staten Island ferry sequence.
Sure. I was just looking at that in my notes.
Because we have a lot in terms of that, and Marisa, you pulled some initial stuff about this. Do you want to kind of kick us off?
Yeah, so with the production designer Oliver Scholl, he had to start modeling the actual Staten Island ferry, and they located a wooden scale model, and took photos and measurements of the real ferry that they would later film on, called the Spirit of America. And from there, the set designers Richard Mays and Kilwong Yu were able to create a 3D model and generate blueprints and for the construction of the crew. And at the end of the day, the production team built an enormous set, 60 feet wide, 40 feet high, and 100 feet long model for the ferry.
Yeah, and then putting it on hydraulics, they were able to split the ship as determined in the computer model, matching to what VFX could do. I mean, it's a set piece in the movie for sure. Mm-hmm. It looked really great, and you had many things going on too. And that's, again, I'm going to go back to directing. That's a set piece where there's lots happening. You've got people in peril, you've got bad guys, you've got the FBI coming in, ship coming apart, water coming in, your hero trying to figure everything out. That's a lot of dancing to do. And I think as a director, he really handled that scene very, very well, where we didn't get lost and not know what was happening at any given moment with our superhero. It was very well done.
Yeah, and it had 40,000 gallons of water was being, splashed onto that set, and they dumped it down the middle, of course, and they had like real cars in the car bay area, so that it was an actual working practical set on hydraulics, no less, that were splitting apart. So that's a big feat.
Yes, absolutely. That's more water than I can even imagine.
Yeah, and I mean, they filmed 2 weeks in New York. They included Queens, Astoria, Sunnyside, Coney Island, Long Island, Staten Island, and which is cool because Amy Pascal says, it's really important that we get the New York flavor because he is New York.
I will say, because we even jumped around to we went to Washington and so forth, it didn't feel as New York to me.
Right.
And I especially in comparison to Sam Raimi, I mean, all he's doing is swinging in New York.
New York.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, even though they shot there for portions of it, it didn't feel as New York.
Yeah, it was
my one thing, this might be a little bit off, but when the whole monument scene, because you're down in Washington, D.C., I was like, no one's realizing that Spider-Man's not in New York right now. No one's making this connection that why the heck would Spider-Man be in Washington, D.C. right now? What would bring him down there? Like,
That's
no
true.
one questioned it. And it's not even like...
He's a superhero.
And even when it was in the news, they're like, oh yeah, we were saved by Spider-Man. Like, what the hell is he doing in Washington, D.C.?
I didn't think of that question.
You know who questioned it?
Who?
The Vulture.
Yeah, exactly. Like afterwards.
Yeah,
afterwards. But I was like, I would hope that the audience was a little bit smart in putting 2 and 2 together.
My nitpickiness about that scene was, and there could have been a line of dialogue or something that I missed, but I was like, dude, why are you going the hardest route to get? Why didn't you just go inside and go up the elevator shaft? You have web slingers that would be a hell of a lot easier. And for some reason, this scene, I kept on thinking of the opening scene to Speed, which has the great elevator scene that Keanu Reeves saves the day, and he's coming down the shaft. And to me, that was a far more intense scene. Where this one, I was like, well, why are you on the outside? Like, when you can easily get up much quicker if you went up the shaft. Right?
He's a kid. He's not thinking.
Yeah.
I don't know.
I think
I don't know.
I think it was also to show just his physical ability of climbing. Maybe.
Maybe.
To
me, there just seemed to be an easier way for him to get up there. And using the tech, I mean, he had to get into a window that was. It just.
I imagine there was a security lockdown. That's probably the only reason why he probably couldn't get it.
I think it was just to create an obstacle, for Spider-Man. Because then, it would have been too easy to go inside, climb up. No, instead we get him on the outside, trying to break through this like plexiglass window.
Yeah, but you say too easy. He still has to save these people in an elevator. And again, if you're able to make a scene of suspense, say in Speed, where the people do not have superpowers, like this guy has some superpowers that he could try to web sling or something's not working right. There are ways that they could have crafted that to be more suspenseful, I felt.
As I may mention, the action set pieces weren't the strongest for me, so I don't necessarily disagree. Marisa, we kind of touched on the suit, but we did tease that we also had a lot more, and so I want to talk about Spidey's suit.
Well, yeah. The cool thing is that the Spidey suit, the Marvel concept design team. The costume designer Louis Frogley, he says we are all very.
Is it Louis or Louise?
Oh, probably Louis. Sorry, I'm butchering everybody's names today. We are all very influenced by the work of Steve Ditko and try as hard as possible to follow the strong imprint that he created. Says Frogley. For the Spider-Man suit, he worked very closely with Marvel head of visual department Ryan. I'm not going to say his last name.
Gebhardt. Gebhardt.
To achieve the look, and Ryan even worked with us to place the lines on the suit. Robin Gebhardt was the person responsible for the construction of the suit. And just the whole tie-in with the suit and the Marvel comic universe, we know that there's actually leaked trailer footage from D23 in 2007 that just happened. It shows that Tom Holland's Spidey is donning the actual new Iron Man suit. Iron Spidey suit that they show at the end of this film, right. That he's actually wearing it in the new upcoming Avengers Infinity War. So these suits that we see we're going to see it in more films. Yeah. So it is very important.
I like at least the texture aspect of this suit. I thought that they got down really, I thought the suit looked cool.
Yeah, I liked it a lot too.
Yeah.
I agree. Let's talk about the Vulture, because I think from a production standpoint, that was, we've talked about Tony's suit before, so, and we've seen it before, but the Vulture, this was the first time that we've really seen that, and that was exciting.
Yeah, it was good, and it was like I was saying before, he's not, like the Marvel Universe, one of my biggest things is like, usually a superhero becomes a superhero because of an outside force. Gets bit by a spider, gets this goo on him or something, or they gamma rays or whatever. Mm-hmm. This is a villain that didn't happen to, so he has to create his stuff himself. And he first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man #2. Okay, so he's a very early on classic type of a villain, and I did like the way that his suit actually looked as if a construction person put that suit together.
It looked so heavy.
It looked heavy, but there was a method behind it. It looked like there wasn't anything on there that looked impractical, so to speak. The wingspan, I thought, was pretty cool. 36 feet for a wingspan. And it was more like a vehicle aircraft that he strapped himself into rather than a jetpack, which looks heavy. It looked really heavy. And the concept started from Marvel's head of visual development, Ryan Meandering, who produced the template from which the costume designer, Louis Frogley, would design the costume. And it was made out of like World War II fabric for the pants, slight sheen, lit everything. So there was a tangibility in this, much, or it just had a texture, much like Spider-Man's suit. That was unlike other villains that we've seen in previous Spider-Man movies. So, and it looked built.
It looked built. It looked clunky. Like if you compare that to Iron Man, everything's so mechanical in the right way. This just looked like, I don't know, like I almost describe it like almost like a hydraulic lift that you have to like pump yourself as opposed to having like just the lift go up itself. Like this was just you had to put in the work to make the suit and make the wings work.
Yeah.
Versus Iron Man, the fact that Iron Man doesn't even have to be in the suit anymore,
right?
And Iron Man's flying about. Yeah. That's the difference.
Yeah, there was a learning curve to flying the Vulture suit. I also like to for you comic book fans, his fur collar for the jacket, with to hint at the feathers on a real Vulture. Once again, that was respect to Steve Ditko's original Vulture. So they took great stride, as did the other movies. I have to say, as did the previous incarnations of Spider-Man, of paying homage to the origin, to the comic book page, and lifting things up off of those pages, particularly to Stan Lee, of course. But, and again, it is the man that makes the suit. You don't buy it if you don't buy Michael Keaton as Toomes, and he did it really well. I thought he played it well, and he played it like he was a guy that, okay, I learned how to use this. I made this out of alien tech. This is my suit.
Absolutely. One of the things we didn't talk about, but why don't we touch upon now, is the bumpers, or whatever you want to call them, the good old end credit stuff.
End credit sequence.
Captain America.
The first one's the jail scene, then Captain America.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. I liked them because, I felt those were also moments of comedic relief. Not that even though this whole film was basically light, you still had good actual comedy in it for laughs. I enjoyed it. And actually, they filmed a bunch of those, apparently, with John Watts just, wrote out all these, few lines for Chris Evans to actually just read, because he only had him for a small amount of time, and he just had him do all these stand-ups and stuff. And they actually cut a lot of them, which will appear on the DVD Blu-ray special feature credits, apparently.
Yeah, and to further that point, the final button in the movie, it says, how many more of these things we got to do?
Right.
Obviously they did a lot. I'm glad that they had fun with them, even
I
though
love
it
their
raises
self-awareness.
Yes.
Yeah.
And again, it just goes to the Captain America jingoism of stay in school, kids, and kids are falling asleep. or it's in the principal's office. Hey, I know somebody cool. Watch this. Again, it does beg the question, isn't he an outlaw? But regardless, they were fine little interludes within the movie. Now, did you want to talk about the ending buttons?
The jail?
Yeah. I guess.
I mean, it certainly, that's kind of where it can head into next. Because right now where it leaves it is, Vulture knows the secret, but he's tight-lipped. He's D&D, as they say, deaf and dumb. He's not going to say nothing.
Right.
But it'll be interesting to see where that goes. And in terms of buttons, I thought, what I appreciated about this was it was a very simple thing. It sets up things you don't know necessarily what, but at the same time it closes out a story as well. Which most things just kind of it just thrusts you into this world, and you're like, well, what does that mean? Where's this going? And it just sparks too many things. Whereas it has more of a sense of conclusion rather than a sense of beginning.
And did you pick up on that the character that approached him was one of the henchmen at the ferry?
Yeah.
Because a friend of mine said, I didn't know who that guy was. I go, well, he was a henchman on the ferry thing. And he's like, really? He goes, I don't remember seeing him. I said, I get that. It's not like he was in that scene a ton, and there was a lot of other people going on. But did you recognize him too at the end? As him being at the ferry, the guy that Toomes runs into?
No.
Yeah,
Anthony?
I actually didn't catch that part, essentially, but I did have hints as to who he was at the very end. And if you notice, he had a tattoo of a scorpion on his neck. Yeah, so I'm guessing they're building him up to be the scorpion.
Yeah, apparently so.
Yeah.
Let's talk editing. A couple of things to note here. Dan Lebenthal He edited it, and John Watts is very grateful for his work on this. He's done other of the Marvel movies, whether Iron Man, Ant-Man, and as Watts points out, and Thor, I think. And one of the cool things, one of the more interesting things that I found, the first cut ended up being shorter than the movie, which is practically unheard of.
It really
Rare.
is.
That's very rare.
Yeah, rarely do people say you need to put more in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it shows that, whenever someone has that ability, because it's always easier to add in, quote, babies and expand things than it is to cut out babies.
Sure.
And babies being, like, things you're just in love with, not actual babies, for those of you not in the film world.
Slay your darlings.
Yes. So it showed that he was committed to this idea of creating the best product rather than like, oh my God, I love this, we have to keep this in.
Right.
Which is a hard thing to do.
And it's very efficient and economical. And I think unless you haven't shot stuff,
maybe, I don't know.
I mean, like, we need, because what is heard of, and we've heard of this before, but it's usually when a production is in trouble. Like, they'll say, we need more humor, or we need to lighten this up more, and then sometimes they have to reshoot. Now, I don't know what the case is on this, but it didn't feel, I will say this movie didn't drag.
No, it didn't. And John Watts himself said that actually there's no big scenes was cut out of the film, so they didn't cut anything big. But it was more just figuring out how long or short it should be, like each particular scene. So that's how he had to play with the time span and time duration of this film.
Yeah.
So there weren't big moments cut out that would change the exposition or change the actual narrative of the story, which I appreciate.
Yeah, same here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Music. Good old Michael Giacchino.
Yep.
Started since the Doctor Strange days here at Marvel, and the Spider-Man. I enjoyed that they brought that in.
Mm-hmm.
That was really cool. It's such an iconic thing.
Yeah, and which I think has been, I can't recall the Amazing Spider-Man, the Andrew Garfield Spider-Mans, if they
Really
cleverly incorporated that in. I know they did in the Sam Raimi movies. In the way that Michael Giacchino incorporated it in the opening overture for this, I thought was very clever. I thought the score to this was, I thought it was good. There's so many superhero movies out now that the scores blend in, especially in the Marvel universe.
Well, because
They
they're
all
part
start
of a greater
sounding
whole.
alike.
Right.
Yeah.
So, that's why when you see a Guardians of the Galaxy, when you have score with source music, it's refreshing. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. And you know me, I do love score. Giacchino's score was fine for this movie. It was superhero.
I really enjoyed it. I especially enjoyed it during the moment of all the rubble, and he's like lifting it off. You get, and even Giacchino said himself that was his favorite moment when he was pinned, because there's a sadness to the pain and struggle, and it's a big heroic type of upswell of music compared to the plucky and clumsiness that, as he says, as it has been up until that point. You felt the dramatic sense of, the realness of him, becoming who he was.
Absolutely.
And then also because, we mentioned it earlier with, the John Hughes type of thing, they actually did try to do a bunch of, 80s synth-like noise, in technological cues for the movie, but it actually really didn't work, and they ended up cutting it. So there was a lot of 80s sounds and 80s songs that they originally wanted to be a part of this film, but it just wasn't working out.
Yeah.
And that's where more the orchestral came over.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
Well, there you go. Another interesting fact, shifting gears though, This movie, in promotional value, cost $140 million, spanning over 30 brands. So talk about collaboration, right? And in terms of Sony, it's on par with their 007 movies. So they haven't gone this deep into it in quite a while. As I made mention, Tony Stark, Robert Downey Jr. was in all the marketing, no matter what. And so it got a lot of people excited, but at the same time, I did feel, I don't know, I didn't know kind of what to think about it. It almost felt like a buddy comedy movie between them, from the marketing.
Right.
And so that's why I was kind of, it was interesting to see that wasn't fully the case. That Tony Stark is very much, the slap of the hand. Don't do that. Don't do that.
Right.
Regardless, the marketing paid off because this movie is it's making money.
It definitely is.
Yeah. Thus far, let's do a quick, thus far domestically, since its release on July 7th, $264 million domestic. Foreign, we're talking $320 million. So this reboot, this reinvestment into Spider-Man for Sony too, that's a big deal. That's like the biggest thing that they've had in a long time, considering what the fallout that they've had since the hacking and all that stuff. It opened up number one,
Of course.
$117 million. Do you know, there were some people that said it was going to be doing like 95, 98, and I'm like, I don't know how this doesn't do a six-figure number. And its production budget's like 175. You're looking close to like $300 million budget, which Foreign has already pulled in.
Yeah.
So their marketing to really, I think, specifically went in for, you mentioned at the very beginning about how you felt this went for a younger audience. And like every Spider-Man movie I've been to, there's always been kids in it, whether it's Tobey Maguire or Andrew Garfield, dressed as Spider-Man. In fact, I saw it at the theater when I saw this opening weekend. But the marketing seemed more teenager-ish than it has been before. The final poster with him laying down wearing the yellow hoodie, eating a churro or whatever it was, hanging on the thing. So their marketing, I think, on this movie was a little more targeted, but the dividends that paid off were fantastic, I think. And it plays to be you said it was lighter. I really think that helped with parents.
Yeah, that they could go see it.
That they would see it, and at the end of the movie, they might not be second guessing. Whoa! Wow! That was a little bit heavy for my kid. So, I think that tonal change helps a lot too, for repeatability factor. However, it should be interesting to note that Homecoming had the largest second week drop of any other Marvel Cinematic Universe movie. Now, obviously, it doesn't affect the $264 million gross that much, but I do find that it's interesting that it had the highest drop, which I think was about 60% from its opening weekend.
Also, in fairness, it opened July 4th weekend, so that was a weekend to go see the movie.
It was after July.
Yeah, it was after, but it was around a national holiday that people would be able to go see this.
So I just found I found that to be an interesting stat.
What came in? War for the Planet of the Apes.
War for the Planet of the Apes.
What else came out? Nothing else really came out.
Nothing really big in tentpole, and I think that surprised a lot of people
Despicable Me around that time too.
Yeah, I think that a lot of people felt War wouldn't be number one; that it would still come in second to Spidey, but it came in at number. It did come in at number one, and I think Spider-Man was number two. We want to talk, if we can, for a second, talk about perception of this movie. This has been happening a lot, and I noticed it on Spider-Man. There's something that I'm calling overhyping, over-capitulating on a movie, because I've read so many reviews where the reviewer said, best Marvel Cinematic Universe movie ever made. Best in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And I didn't do the research to look up these reviewers past, but we're overpraising stuff. Like, I got in an argument with a friend who said, this movie's great. I said, well, your definition of great, my definition of great, I think differ. I don't think it was a great movie, and I'm not saying this movie was horrible, so I don't want to get the wrath of people who think that I think this movie sucks. I'm just not finding this to be, this isn't on a Guardians of the Galaxy, which again, people were saying that was the best Marvel Cinematic Universe. I think people's memories, they're either forgetting or we're just giving too much praise.
Well, I think there's too much of a dichotomy. I mean, it's from the news standpoint. It's either got to be fantastic or it's got to suck. You know, how do you sell a headline of like Spider-Man: Homecoming, wonderful movie, or like middle of the road movie, blah blah. Like,
but again, not, and this is where I'm going. Not every movie has to be great. Because if they were, then going to the movies is boring, right? Because nothing's special. So a movie like Spider-Man, it can be a very good movie. It can be a good movie. That's the other thing that I think really hurts too. And I always hate this in discussion about movies. What did you think of this movie? And people will start off with, well, it wasn't great, but it was really good. Well, don't start off with, once you start off with, it wasn't great, that's a negative aspect, even if you end up liking the movie. Just say what you thought of the movie. I thought the movie was really good. It's a good movie. It's a fun movie. It's worth seeing on the big screen. There's nothing wrong with that. But by overpraising, it was sort of kind of killing that middle movie that might not be great, but it's still very entertaining and enjoyable to watch in the big screen. So, I don't know. All these people who said that this was great and the best MCU movie, I sort of kind of, again, I understand.
I think it's
all
refreshing and different.
It's different.
Yeah. So by that, it's like, oh, it's, you know.
So isn't Guardians of the Galaxy, and I think Guardians, the first one, is still a better movie.
I agree. I think people, part of it is they react to the timing of things, right? So
sure.
Based on the emotion of how they're going and whatnot, and I just do think people are naturally wired in a sense to just have extremes and they can't land somewhere in the middle.
Yeah.
And I think also the problem is there are now so many Marvel movies. How do you compare them to the other ones that are already out? So, like, is it good enough to be better than this movie, or is it, more crappy than this movie, And I think it's just also, but just the oversaturation. And again, this is an opinion-based show, so everyone's opinion is going to be different. Doesn't mean you're wrong. Doesn't mean you're right.
Well, it means I'm right. No, but again, I look at Ant-Man. And Ant-Man, from a story standpoint and everything, I thought that was even like a better movie.
That was a good movie, also not a standalone.
More of a standalone than this, I think.
Well, there's a whole fight with Angel. Oh, I forget his name. I'm sorry.
Falcon.
Falcon.
Yeah, Falcon.
He's in the movie for that scene. Like, he doesn't keep on coming back like Tony Stark does. But I'm just saying, like, even for Spider-Man, I like the first two, and then I put this one in there. This is far better than Spider-Man 3 was. And
oh my God, yeah.
I had my issues. As much as I liked Andrew Garfield and Emma Stone, I thought that they picked good casting. Obviously, they have good chemistry, I think. But I had problems with the stories. And again, talk about multiple villains. This one to me is a Spider-Man movie as a whole. I think it for me it comes in at 3. How about for you, Marisa?
Well, I can't really place it,
No.
but I
Okay.
think these were actually better than a lot of them that I've seen. I can't really place it on the fly right now, but we know that there's more films coming out.
Absolutely.
John Watts is already in talks for the second one, and he's practically signing his name now. And we know that Tom Holland is actually contracted for 3 movies. So.
Was he 3? Because I
Yeah.
thought he was down for like something like 8.
Yeah, I think like they're in talks that he's going to make appearances in 6 different movies, but he's contracted for 3 Spider-Man movies.
Spider-Man movies, okay.
And like have appearances in, like, he had one in Civil War. He's
Sure.
gonna have one in Infinity War.
And
so,
probably
like,
Infinity War 2.
Yeah, so like he's gonna have other appearances too, which would make it anywhere from 6 to 8.
Right.
But he's contractually obligated for 3 Spider-Man movies.
Oh, okay.
So we're gonna get more.
I mean, in terms of in terms of reception, obviously this is doing great for me. I am starting to discourage people from making like a top 10 list and things like that. Everyone always, the number one question, like, oh, you love movies. Oh, what's your favorite movie? You know what? I think it just depends on the moment. It's the movie I would want to watch. It's the movies that I appreciate and return to and so forth. Like, what are my favorite movies? But to say I have a favorite movie and to be able to rank them, I think it's a load of horse shit.
It's the hardest question that I get.
Because it's a bullshit question.
Yeah, but you do understand where it's coming from. Now, when we talk about reception too, the cinema score on this was an A.
Yeah.
Okay,
doing great.
93% on Rotten Tomatoes, and again, 93% for me is high. This is for me at best, this is a mid 80s. At worst, high 70s, low 80s. At worst, at best, mid 80s. 93%. That's really good. Like, you are putting it up there.
I mean, it's near perfect.
Yeah. And
it's not.
it's
near.
not. And I'm just wondering, where did all this praise come from? We have to settle
Good
down
marketing.
with well, you know what? Though I think marketing does have
It had good
can
marketing.
play
Like
to
I've
that.
been seeing trailers and promo spots and trailer spots for this all year.
Yeah.
All year. I was like, yeah, I knew it, but like not once did I actually get tired of it.
Mm-hmm.
There are other films where I'm like, yes, I get it, it's coming out, I'm gonna watch it.
Yeah.
Like I know it, but like I was really still looking forward to seeing this film.
Yeah. So
Fair enough. All right, guys. Well, I think that about does it for us. On behalf of @Serafini TV, correct?
That's right.
How ironic still to this day.
Every time you mention that.
Because it still remains ironic to this day.
Yep. For this show.
you'll say it for the
For this particular
@D Movies 1701.
Hey, and so I've been doing something sort of kind of cool, and I think it might even help the show. I've been actually tweeting out my reviews. So I make it into a link. You can see my full review so that when I come here, I can sort of kind of do a more abridged review.
There you
And
go.
we can get right into the meat of things, but you'll get to see a good draft of where I'm pulling from. So that's something new. Let me know if you like that or not. But I'm trying to my best to use social media to my benefit. and I hope that you support me in that goal.
There you go. As I made mention, our rundown is in the show notes, so feel free to click there, download it, and so forth. And do let us know your thoughts, your opinions on this movie. I'm sure there's plenty of Spider-Man fans out there, so we want to hear from you guys. There's so many perspectives from this. And let us know how did it compare to Tobey Maguire, how did it compare to Andrew Garfield, and how did it just compare to the comics. Whatever you want to talk about, we're here to talk about it with you. Until next time, we've got Dunkirk, we've got War of the Planet of the Apes, we've got Atomic Blonde, so on and so forth coming up, and we've also covered many movies in the Marvel Cinematic Universe in the past, such
So
as
many.
Captain America, Civil War, so check out some of those, have some, go through the library. It's quite an extensive library.
Absolutely.
We'll see you guys next time.
Bye, y'all.
From producers Maria Menounos, Kevin Undergaro, Phil Svitek, and the rest of the Anatomy of a Movie staff, we would like to thank you for listening and subscribing to the show. If you have any questions or comments, feel free to email or tweet us. I'm Sir Richard Wentworth, and this has been Anatomy of a Movie.